All right. Hey guys, welcome to Beyond the Books, the podcast that takes you behind the scenes of accountingdepartment.com. I am your host, Andrea Boccard, welcoming you. Join us. We're going to dive into lessons from the trenches today and every week to help entrepreneurs like you, listeners, growing from building a company, strong company culture to implementing EOS, mastering leadership, and pretty much every other topic in between. We cover it all. We're not afraid to share our stories with you, and each episode we do is going to feature insights from our leadership team, industry experts, or key figures within our company. So whether you're a seasoned entrepreneur looking for tips or you're just starting out looking for it all, we are really ready here to offer you advice and inspiration and share with you everything that we have done for better or worse, failure or success, or transparency, which is exactly why we're here today. So today I'm welcoming back our co-founder, Dennis Najjar, who is really a founder of knowledge on most things. So you should expect to get to know Dennis very well on this podcast, as we cover a lot of topics that are super relevant to entrepreneurs and business owners. But today I brought Dennis on because Dennis is the champion of transparency at ADC. And to be fair, Dennis has evangelized being a champion of transparency throughout the ranks of the company. So I actually think that because of Dennis, most people should be considered champions of transparency here. But it started in one location, in my opinion, and that was with Dennis. And Dennis has truly drove home on a daily, weekly, hourly basis the importance of being transparent. And transparency is a topic that I think is really on the tongues of a lot of entrepreneurs these days. In fact, in preparing for this podcast, I did a lot of research and I found that as recently as, a couple months ago, even Deloitte put out a publication saying that somewhere in the ballpark of 86% of leaders surveyed in their most recent capital trends research said that the more transparent an organization is, the greater the workforce trust is. So there's a direct correlation to benefits of transparency. Um, but transparency is, I think, a fairly new revelation in the workplace. I mean, as far as that long-term progression of corporate life has gone. I don't know, Dennis, what do you think about transparency?
Well, I think transparency starts with the individual. It's a theme, right? You hear this over and over with me. I wanted it to be a company that I would want to work for, that I would want to work in. And one of the things that I look for is openness and communication. And ultimately, this word we keep referring to in this conversation, transparency. And so I felt like we should be doing that. If this is what I would want, just like I've said this in other podcasts and internally, I've said this, build a place that you'd want to work in, then that would be part of it, would be to be more open and to be more aware. I mean, there's a lot of events that have happened over the last 20 years, and I'm sure we're going to get into a few of them, and they echo that sincerity about being transparent with the employees.
Well, let me ask you a question. It's my kind of opinion. I mean, I've been in corporate America for, let's say, 20 years. My first jobs, nobody told me anything. I mean, nothing. And to be fair, I was raised in a culture of New York City financial services, need to know basis. If you were in a cubicle, no one behind a door was talking to you about anything. I mean, I think once a year I got some sort of report from some corner office on many floors above me that gave me some sort of update on a stock option I might be able to order or purchase into because of something. That was about it. I had no idea where the company was going. I assumed that we were going somewhere. Now, back in 2007, like many people, pretty early in my workforce, I assumed that I had this great job in financial services that would take care of me forever. And then what happened in 2008? And my friends a couple blocks up the street at Lehman Brothers could tell you a lot about what happened in that day. But, you know, transparency in that year and in many years prior, I,
Non-existent.
yeah,
Yeah, oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I grew up in that, 20 years before that, where it was like a class system. You were, the higher you up you were, the more you knew. The further down the pole you got, the less you knew, and you were just there to do your job. And there wasn't that sharing of information. It was truly a class system in that regard. Yeah, I would agree with that 100%. I
yeah.
don't know where the change came from in the last 10 or 15 years, For me, it was natural. I just felt like this is what I wanted. Maybe because I grew up in an era where it wasn't there and you kind of always felt left out, not knowing what was going on. How could you feel part of something unless you actually could be aware of what you were part of and not just plugging away? I can remember a quick story. I got to tell you, you know me and my stories. I
I
did a
love your story.
presentation. I did a presentation. I got on one day on one of our team calls. I just decided at the end, something sparked a conversation in me about the importance of people in an organization. And I said, a company is like a wheel, and all the employees are the spokes. And every spoke has to be there in order for that wheel to roll properly. It doesn't matter what your spoke is. Everybody has to do a job. I said, I don't care whether you're doing the same job for the last 10 years. That job is important, or you feel this desire to go up to the ranks and apply for a job that we or position that we created and further yourself. That's just as important. And a couple of people after the call reached out to me, some of the old timers, who've been around 10 years. And they said to me, wow, thank you for saying that. I'm like, well, what did I say? They said my job was important. And I'm like, you're absolutely, your job is important. It is so important that all the people that make a company work, from the janitor up to the guy in the corner office, is they're all necessary.
You know
And so
what's
if you're an
funny?
entry level person, that's fine.
Like to your point, and like coming from a company like ours where I feel and you feel like people should know this. This is how we believe we treat people. This is how we believe the company culture leads people to feel that you are valued, that you are here, because that is how we feel. To have people even in our company still going, I really needed to hear that, or, I'm really so glad you said that because I saw validation in that. I mean, if you're coming from our company and you're saying that, imagine coming from the companies that haven't embraced a culture of
Right. Yeah.
transparency and
Right.
support to that extent. I mean,
Yeah.
I can only imagine what it must feel like to live in that need to know darkness. And you know, how
Well, they
could
just needed assurance. They
yeah,
just needed assurance that they were still valuable to the company because they saw other people who maybe came in after them applying for positions and getting promoted and saying, well, geez, where does that leave me? A new person comes in. So maybe that's a level of transparency.
right. No, I think that's a really valid application of transparency. And I think where we'll end up going in this conversation are all these different versions of transparency, because there's some that are going to be really
Yeah.
obvious. We're going to talk about that. What do we talk about company financials? What are we sharing and who are we sharing with? I guarantee there are
Yeah.
listeners right now going, so are you giving them your budget? Like, what are you doing? But
Mhm.
there's more than that to transparency. It's funny because I have to wonder if the companies that we were just sort of talking about, the companies of 20 years ago, when they didn't share with people, did they realize that maybe people felt like I'm super replaceable? I don't matter. I don't have an important role here. I am not a big contributor that I'm worth knowing what's coming around the corner or what the future of the company looks like. I mean, let's talk about this. Internal communications. Internal communications roles at companies 20 years ago were wildly different than they are today.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
mean, it would be like, "Hey, people, health insurance enrollment is coming out. Please click here." You know?
Yeah.
That was
Yeah.
that
Very
was where they
benign.
went.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just obligatory stuff.
Yes, yes, and now we've got entire people ops in existence. And that's something, I mean, even in our 200-person company that we're building. As a result, last year was the first year we introduced an internal engagement role.
Hmm.
I mean, that is a significant evolution, I think, of a lot of people's companies where they're starting to build actual teams and accountability roles that are focused entirely on engagement, communications, making people aware of what's happening, and as a result, making them feel completely integrated and important and in tune with everything.
It's a generational shift. The next generation is coming up. It's telling us old timers, hey, we want more than what you had. And that more is centered around work-life balance as a perfect example of that. And you go with that, the whole conversation about transparency. They want to know what's going on.
So
Different than I'd say my generation did.
so that's what's so interesting to me, because if you're not out of that generation, how did you end up a champion of this. There's a big difference. There are some people who are of a previous generation who are being dragged over this threshold.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, I don't want to sound like a broken record. It's just it, that's the kind of place I would want to work in if I had to have a job, is where they were more open. Yeah. So that's just the way I operate as a person. And so from that perspective, I guess it just came naturally to me. I mean, you've heard the other natural things that I exhibit, and that just happens to be one of them. So I don't want to take any more credit than that. It's no
Well,
more
so lots of
scientific.
things came naturally. I know that. I know that encouraging people to, communicate their work and their personal, encouraging people to be their whole person at work is a huge area where you are really, really profound in how you speak. And that's resonated throughout the company. In fact, I'm gonna lay out the very first like technical takeaway that has come out of this company, and that is throughout teams, we encourage people to build in time in your day, whether that's blocking time, putting it on your calendar, not being concerned about it, but literally for yourself. I mean, I know I tell my team, like, if you want to go exercise, which you should, get up from your desk. Like,
Right.
do not just sit here all day long. Block it on your calendar. I promise I will not put a meeting over it. You want to put an hour move time, put it on. And unlike some companies, we love seeing that. I love seeing that on people's calendars. What's more transparent than that? Knowing that you can share what matters to you personally without anybody going, I don't know if they're committed.
Right. Absolutely. And that's right along the same lines of the work-life balance. I guess that's one of the things that I didn't weight equally in my earlier years when my children were young. I mean, we had the traditional family. I went off to work. My wife stayed home. She raised the kids. I didn't go to a lot of the events. And then looking back, as my kids are going to be listening to this podcast, they're going to hear me say this for the first time. I missed out. And so I guess when I'm starting a new chapter, I decide that, you know what? These moms are working here. They shouldn't be missing all these things because they only happen for a short period and then they're up and going. And we have people now who have started with us. You're one of them, where their kids were young, if not
4 months
born.
old and
Yep,
non-existent.
right. And now they're operating entities. They're doing their own thing. They've got sports. They got outside
Yeah.
activities. We've got kids who were young and now are graduating college, and they've been in the moms or the dads have been here this whole time. And I guess that little bit of guilt that I carried, I know I've done my penance now because I've kind of pushed this whole concept of don't miss anything. And I beat it over the head of every new
Oh,
person. I
yeah.
make a point of telling them in their welcome meeting with me.
Well, and to be fair, I want to clarify something because I know you just said moms, and we have a huge percentage of moms that work here, but
Yeah.
we also have dads.
Yeah, I'm dad. I said
And
dads.
this
Yep.
is this is I mean, listen, I agree with you. This is a gender thing because, my husband, who's 47, he just had a birthday. I'm like, wow, how old is he? He will not miss a kids event either. And that is not something that his parents were, that's not
Never.
the culture they had. And he will tell his boss the same thing, like, no, I'll have my kids' concert and then I'll be in and I have to
Yeah.
do these things. And there is this understanding of that. But I think that in the same vein, the companies that are encouraging you to be honest and open about it, not hide it, not I'm sick, you don't have to lie
Right.
to like
Take
that.
a whole day off when you
It's
only needed an
Yes,
hour.
it's incredible that there's this sort of divergence where the companies who get it are going, yes, please come and talk to me. Come in after the concert and tell me how it was. Because you
Yeah.
have to have that level of comfort. You can't be walking in going, oh, I had a really important doctor's appointment. Like, no, just tell me your kid's mock trial went well. I want to
Right.
know that. Like, but
Right.
it's funny because that is an aspect of transparency that people overlook so quickly because they forget that the slightest sort of ability to make people feel comfortable sharing their whole selves at work will lend itself to people then just coming to work. I mean, imagine if I couldn't and I had to take off a whole day because Logan had a mock trial for an hour.
Yeah. Right.
Then you'd miss out on a whole day of my productivity,
Yep.
and I would
Well,
be kind of salty.
you could take it as far as, I remember the early days when we had all of our servers in my office in New Jersey. And not that we monitored anybody, but we did have the ability to see people coming and going. And there was this routine that established. Once you made this sort of laid this law down, this is what would happen. 7:30, there'd be half a dozen, whatever, staff would sign on. They'd work till 8 o'clock. They'd sign off and they'd come back at 8:30. And then around 2:30, the same half a dozen staff would sign off and they'd show up
Yep.
another half an hour later. And you knew what they were doing. And not that we encouraged them
Nothing
to
wrong
do
with
it,
it.
of course,
Yeah.
but there was nothing wrong with it. And they were taking care, they came to work, they knew they were responsible, they took care of what they had to, then they bowed out, did what they had to do with their family, came back in, no stress, no mess, except if you're living in the north and you got to deal with the snow and the ice in the wintertime, but that's your problem. Uh, and it was a wonderful thing to see, to know that they had that sort of flexibility to come and go and to be treated like an adult. I mean, that's the other part of this is you're treating
Hmm.
people like an adult when you say you manage your schedule, you know what you need to do, get it done, and the rest will fall into place.
Yeah. So okay. Back then, you're talking 20, 30, 40 employees, you're growing
Yeah,
slowly, everyone knows each other. Now we're 200 people. So some things come along with that. Like you're trying to schedule a meeting for 10 or 15 people, people are in different time zones, people have
yeah.
different conflicts. I am so proud of the fact that when I schedule a meeting, first of all, if I open up a bunch of people's calendars, everybody's got pick up kids, drop off car, grab this, grab that. I put every personal appointment I have on my calendar, probably because I'd forget them if I didn't. But I also know that if Bill opens my calendar or you open my calendar, I'm not going to be like judged. You're not going to be sitting there going, well, Andrea clearly is not that committed to her job that she has to go pick up her kids every day at 2:30. Like it doesn't even exist. And what's great is we organize our meetings so that people can attend them. We're not like, can you move picking up your kids or hire a driver or it's
Get a
very
neighbor.
yeah, there's never this sort of assumption that you're going to put your personal world in the dark, in the shadows, behind a curtain, or on the back burner. We're gonna set it up so that it's gonna work for everybody.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So I think that's, that in terms of transparency and company culture is such a formidable aspect and like a really serious pillar of transparency in companies. Um, you know, that alone, I think, would do wonders for developing trust in a company. Because if you feel like you can tell somebody something that's personal to you without judgment and with support, you're immediately creating interpersonal connections that
Mhm.
drive all of that. But there's so much more to transparency.
Yeah.
So
Couple more layers of the onion to peel back.
a couple more. So one area that I think people are a little like I could imagine a lot of business owners that maybe do or don't do this are just going, you know what, I will do that. I'm gonna start. I mean, you lead by example, so does Bill. You put right on your calendar, golf
Yep.
or chiropractor or whatever it is. We
Yep.
all put our things on. And so because you do it and because I do it, people who report to me do it, and so on and so forth. We don't just tell people do this and then I don't do it and I'm a workaholic and then everyone goes, does she really mean that? We're super open about it.
Yeah.
But you know, then there's other pieces of this. So we have a staff call every 2 weeks. And I think that that's where things have evolved over time. So years ago, I don't know that we ever really were super transparent about company financials. I mean, a lot of companies aren't super transparent to their employees about company financials. I remember when I first started here and we'd fill out applications and I'm like, hey guys, what's the revenue? And Bill's like, why? I'm like, well, because it's question number 10. So, and he'd be like, pick don't know. I'm like, okay. So talk to me about it's true.
I'm sure it is.
He would be so quick to tell me he wants steak, but I have no idea what the revenue is. Um, But now I do know the answer. I mean, it's been 10 years, so
Yeah.
something changed. And I do think that the company financials, projections, things like that are part of what people mean when they talk about transparency of a
Yeah.
company. We're not a public company. You don't have any requirements to share anything whatsoever.
Right.
What do you choose to share it and why?
Well, when we now have a partnership with all of our employees, we're in a what we would typically refer to as a profit sharing arrangement. And how else can you share the share the end result without sharing the details along the way? It's an interesting topic, and it's not. Well, I'm going to put it to you this way. How many people know what their balance sheet of their next door neighbor looks like, or their W-2 from the neighbor on the other side? I mean, these are just not the kinds of things that we talk about.
Mhm.
They're personal. How much I save is a function of my lifestyle. How much you save is a function of your lifestyle. And so there's no right or wrong. It's where we reside in that spectrum. And so here we needed to share enough to help people understand that they have a direct impact on the profit sharing. This is not something passive. It's called profit sharing because we're sharing in profits. And how can we share in something if you don't know what's driving it? And so, yes, it was a little bit of a uh, Hail Mary to start talking about it
Yeah.
because it wasn't something we'd done previously. And of course, we have to have disclosures. We are a private company. We don't want anyone on the outside world, knowing these things that we're sharing with our employees. But we're sharing it with them so they can, because they're stakeholders. And the better we can perform, the better we can share in the results. So we do it at a high level. We don't whip out a P&L and start going through every line and sharing, every particular detail, but we give them at a high level the things that impact the bottom line, the things that drive it, the things that they need to be aware of and that they can have influence over,
Yes.
because that's
So
ultimately what it comes down to.
that was a recent shift. I mean, it's really been the past, I would say 2 years. I mean,
Yeah.
since COVID. COVID, I think, was where that first rolled out, where we first sort of started taking an arrow and going, hey, if you want to improve the bottom line, here's the areas where we think we can shore up. But in the past 2 years, we've really gone into gross profit and some of the sort of more granular stuff.
Mhm.
How do you decide what is gonna actually, here's a better one. Gross profit is an interesting is an interesting thing because when we show this to them, it's not all good. There's a whole spectrum. And anybody who understands the accounting part of it, which I should never be explaining to anybody, but I've seen it enough to understand a little bit, knows that there is this sort of this range. And we're a professional services company, each client is different, et cetera, et cetera. We use that as motivation to explain how we are going to drive revenue. What do you think the possible sort of effects were across the board from motivating people to possibly is it possible to give people too much information? And how did you kind of navigate this as we went along? Because we've had, I guess, shifts in, I don't know if
Yeah,
I'm asking this exactly the way I mean to, but this has evolved over time. And I think we've learned some things, we've shifted how we've presented information, and we've refocused specific areas. Were there things that you learned along the way?
absolutely. I mean,
Okay.
at first, I
Got that
probably put
question
out
out
too much info. Yeah, I know where you're going with it. At
then.
first, I put out like everything I could think of, right? That was relevant, but it was a little bit too much information. And so then we started tweaking it. I'm the architect of the presentation. So, what are the pieces that make up the business? What are the pieces that people can have an impact on? Where can they see successes? Because that's important, because it's not just about painting the negative. It's about a balanced picture of, what have we done right and where do we have area for improvement? And so in those clients that our profit is not where we need it to be, it's not because they're not paying the right amount. It's often because we are providing too much service, more than we agreed. So it's something in the industry we call out of scope. It's a kind of a nice thing, if you will, because you got people who want to do more, but the inherent problem in all of that, of course, is that you've got to speak up and we've got to tell the client, we are going to do more for you. So therefore, if you'd like these things, you'll have to pay us for them. And we don't always do that. And I think that's somewhat an inhibiting factor with accounting type people. They don't like talking money. And it's something that we have to constantly work on. So there's those soft spots in
Mhm.
the conversation.
Oh, did you get a lot of feedback when you started sharing more of this, especially with the overwhelming, percentage of the company that is doing the service providing? When they saw this information, was it enlightening? Were they happy about it? Were they confused by it? Were they like, why are you telling me this? This is boring. I don't think that, but what was the overwhelming reaction from people?
I mean, hands down, it was a positive
Mhm.
response. They definitely felt it was a lot of information, and we try to do it in a relatively short period of time. So as we've progressed over the last couple of years, I've shortened the presentation up. I've rather than going 3 levels deep, I'll only go 1 level deep on
Mhm.
certain things, just to kind of make the point and highlight it. I'm probably over transparent is my problem.
Well, that's a valid that's really valid. And I know that for example, there are areas that aren't they're not fluent for people. So like when we try to share sales and marketing stuff, for example, with the company, it's
Right.
not always clear when we share like how many demos and how many file reviews and how many proposals and how many new clients, the entire sales pipeline, for those of you who that was very
Yep.
granular in terms of our terminology, but the sales pipeline and the fall off at each stage, when we try to share that with the company, it doesn't always go over so well because you feel like you need to add a lot of context and explanation. Um, and it's so funny because sometimes I wonder, can you overshare? Can you get to a point where you're creating or where you're scaring people or you're creating concern where maybe there doesn't need to be? And where do you sort of refine your message or how do you tweak it so that people aren't walking away going, "Oh my God, we had less this month, so we must be falling apart," or something like that.
Well, that's interesting you say that because, I had these two sets of emotions running when we first started talking about this. There'll be those that will think we were doing better than we're doing, and then we'll have those that are thinking we're
Yeah,
doing
exactly.
worse.
Well, then you've got
Correct.
people going, "Well, how come you're not paying me more?"
Right, exactly. And you've got this balancing act you do as a business because there's never a guarantee for tomorrow. And so you're constantly juggling all this. We work off a budget, we work off a forecast, we review our numbers every month, we know what's going on. And we're very solid. I mean, there shouldn't be any question about that at this point. But you have kind of these two competing thoughts of what people are going to think once you start sharing these numbers. And that was a little unsettling. I will be honest with you, because I didn't want to disappoint anybody by making them, thinking that we're much
Right.
better, bigger, profitable than we are. And I don't want to make it sound terrible because it really isn't. So I don't know what people's
I
expectation is.
know.
Like, I don't know what my neighbor has next door
You almost
for,
want to ask
you
people in
know,
advance, like, what are you expecting to hear? Like, can I
yeah,
gauge how far off the mark I am?
yeah,
Well,
but
what's
but
funny?
but overall positive, very positive feedback
Yeah.
was provided. Yeah.
What's funny to me is, we're an accounting company. So the vast majority of the presenters and the recipients of the information all speak this language.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we sort of have a leg up on on like a lot of other people. And I'm just wondering if you could give any advice to anybody out there who is like, "Oh, I want to do this, but I'm not an accountant and neither are my people."
Nor is my
Like what
audience.
should they
Yeah.
start with sharing? Because I think we might be a little bit over the heads of some people who would
Yeah,
like to
yeah.
create
I mean,
this.
we definitely drill down into all the segments of the business and what each department is contributing and where their successes or failures are. And I think you can just dial it back and make it more high level, right? You don't need to get as granular. Just start with some basics like what does your revenue forecast look like?
Mhm.
What does your margin forecast look like? And then what is your profitability? And where are those relative to your goals? Because that's a lot of what we share, right? We set a budget at the beginning of the year and we're measuring results against a budget. We're reporting back on that because all of that drives where we're expecting our profit to be at the end of the year and what that means to every employee in the company. So just 3 or 4 high level numbers would probably be enough to get the conversation started, to get people aware of what's going on.
You think that if you're just starting out, you think quarterly is still the right cadence for that or annually or something different?
No, definitely. I would definitely go with Kate quarterly, right?
Quarterly.
Because what you're looking for is you're looking for those increments of time to turn into some actionable steps so that you could report back. Are we doing better? Or are
Mhm.
we staying stable? Or are we unfortunately regressing, right? So where did you want to end up is part of that conversation, and you can't just report that. Here's where we're going to start the year, and we'll let you know how we did once it's over, kind of thing.
Right, right, right. Yeah, we'll see.
Right. You
We'll
want to
tell
avoid,
you how it
right?
works out. See you
Yeah.
later.
Well, we'll see you later. Right.
You
Yeah. You
know,
don't want to
it's
do that.
funny because it's not all financial. Obviously, financial is one of the lightning rods. It's where people immediately think about what am I
Yeah.
sharing, how am I sharing, but it's not all financial. And one of the things that we did is we created a vivid vision, and I think our first one was in 2018. But
Mhm.
we have had iterations of our vivid vision for years now, and not always in a most formal way. But right now with EOS, we have kind of our 3-year picture and our things. But one of the things that we also did from a transparency perspective was align like, hey, here's our goal and here's where we want to be and here's what we've done. And it's not all financial. I mean, one of the things was to be on a best workplace award, like not specific to accounting, but just literally a best workplace award. And I remember the day we hit that, it was 2018 Entrepreneur Top Company Cultures. And I was like, check the box. Like, because, and then when we would report this to people, and we've got sort of this list of things we said we were going after, and then we've got sort of what have we accomplished? We were lining that up and going, okay, here's the status, here's where we're at, and sort of that level of transparency, because most people in a company are not thinking about those goals as they're doing their daily work.
Right. Yeah.
Um,
That's natural. I mean, everyone's focused on their day-to-day responsibility. So pointing out stuff that's not financial is a good thing about accomplishments within a company. So yeah, definitely have more than more than just the numbers to talk about.
yeah. So it's funny because I think that in the past few years, we've done a great job of figuring out the right recipe for sharing information with the company. We've gotten some feedback from employees. We do our annual Best Workplaces survey, which is a part of applying for the Inc. Best Workplaces Award, which we won in 22 and 23, and we are eagerly awaiting the results of 24. But we have our survey answers from people. And so it's interesting because transparency actually came up a lot in some of the responses that we got from people. And I think across the board, if people are not surveying their employees, they probably should. But some of the things that people say are really interesting. So some of them right away, just like somebody said, we have an open door policy. We encourage constructive feedback. Employees are encouraged to share their ideas. Changes are explained, and all employees are kept on the loop. The company operates very transparently. So that second half we just kind of covered, but the first half we haven't talked about at all. And that's really this sort of open door. We want you to tell us your thoughts about not where you're going in your personal life, but like what you think about the company. And I think that that's an aspect of transparency that's often overlooked, other than the
Well,
suggested
it is. I
costs.
think it definitely is overlooked. But here's the thing: I refer to this as transparency as a two-way street. And we talk a lot about what to do when you have a problem in this company. And there is this unfortunate stigmatism that I tell my problem to my boss, whoever I report to, and if they don't resolve it, they can't fix it, I'm stuck. And we have worked really hard at chipping away at that. And, we try to portray ourselves as a very flat organization, but it is just not the environment people are used to. And so they're very reluctant to speak up. And that's one of the pain points I have about this two-way transparency is if you've got a problem, tell somebody. If you don't get satisfaction, tell somebody else. But the old adage is, if I go around my boss, it's going to
Right.
be a problem for me. We try to dispel it all the time, and it does it still exists. I don't
Yeah.
know how long how many generations it'll take for that to get out of
Well,
the way.
Well, to be fair, there's a double whammy effect here, because not only is that's I think very common in most businesses, this feeling of
Oh
sort of
yeah,
how can I actually have this ability to change things? But there's the second piece, which is that we're fully remote. So, one of my favorite examples that Bill actually said to me probably in the first month or two of me working here was like, listen, Andrea, you don't work at a desk where I walk past and I can see you're visibly upset, or someone's sick, or something's going on. I can't see you other than when we engage.
right.
So I don't always know. I can't, I don't have that all day long exposure to you where somebody in a physical environment can sort of see like this person's having a rough day. Something is going on. Something is
Mhm.
upsetting this person. So he drove home really early that you have to come to the table and tell me these things. Otherwise, I have no idea. And, I do think that as managers, we try very hard to sort of say that often to people. I think that, depending on the person, it's successful or it's a struggle and an ongoing challenge to get that to sort of resonate and to feel comfortable for people. But I think ultimately we continuously drive home this sort of like share, 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 tell us, go, go, go. Now it's funny because there's downsides to that. I can tell you when everyone in the company is going to get a glass of water at one point or another. Um, so there's that. In fact, one feedback we got, which I was dying laughing, was please drive home that people do not have to share their every movement so we can stop hearing every time someone is going to get a glass of water. And I personally really laughed because I did not submit that, but I agree with that. So, so how do we navigate this though? I mean, we want people to share. We don't know what's going on. We don't want people to share everything because that's crazy. What are we doing?
Right. Well, it's a little bit of common sense is probably where it falls, and it's feeling comfortable in the way we work. I recently got a Apple Watch not too long ago, and one
I
of the
know you
things
got to
that
stand up now.
it tells me to stand up. In fact, it's being charged right now. I don't have it on, so it's not telling me to stand up. But it tells me to stand up. And the first time it came up when I was on a meeting, I said, I have to get up and walk around. My watch is talking to me. And it kind of turned into a little bit of a joke. But then it went and sort of took on a life of its own in terms of we need to get this message out to people that because we are in this Zoom world today or Teams world where everything is on camera, it's okay to get up. It's okay to move around. It's okay to go fill your water jug, and not
Right.
need permission.
But not tell
Uh,
anybody. You're good. Just go. You're a
just
human being.
go, just do it.
Yeah.
Right. So I did it this morning on a meeting, and I got up. I said, I'm walking around. My watch is talking to me. So, yeah. So, I mean, I think it's a little bit of common sense in realizing that this is a part of the new world we all work in.
Mm-hmm. I mean,
Listen,
I love when my Apple Watch yells at me. And for some reason, we're always on the same timer because we're always like, oh, oh, oh. It's all
I think across the galaxy
yes.
it goes off at
The
the same time
entire
for
country
everybody.
is actually standing up all at the same time right now.
Right.
So there's that.
Exactly. Well, in
Um,
your respective time zone.
yeah. But it's actually incredible to me. We're all very well programmed. But the truth is, you're right. We really do encourage everybody to share. Sometimes we're like, okay, you don't need to share every movement though, because you're an adult and we trust you. So it's
Right.
totally fine. You can go get water without putting that in the chat box. And
Yeah.
I think there's some sort of wiggle room there for people who are new and getting used to it. People who are not sure if we're really being, I say all the time, I came out of New York City to come to this company. In New York City, well, I mean, I haven't been there in a while, but it didn't exist then that people were this comfortable and caring. In fact, when I first showed up here for the first 6 months, I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. Like, these people cannot be that nice and they cannot be that caring because I've never seen anything like this and I don't believe it exists. So for the longest time, I was like, sort of like, sure, I'll be transparent and tell you all my stuff.
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
yeah,
You're
just
way, I
no,
know. It
not
does take a
happening.
while. I mean, most people aren't used to it. I mean, there's no way around it. They don't trust it.
Yeah,
They just can't because
you're
of their
not
prior
conditioned to
experience.
trust this.
Exactly. But I will say the most important part of all this little jabber we've had here is talk about it,
Mhm.
get it out, keep reinforcing it. If your actions speak just as loud as your words, but you have to have both, and you've got to preach it like it's expected. If you don't do that, then it won't become part of your fabric. And I think pretty comfortably is part of our fabric today.
So, so I think that these are all really good tips for business owners. There's a couple of things. There's actually one interesting one feedback that I wanted to bring up to get your read on because I think it's something that one we probably have to talk about anyway for the company, and two, it's kind of valid and right along the lines of like how are we getting people to speak up? Because one person, and this was all anonymous, so we have no idea who submitted what, which is fine. But one person literally said, and because it says there was a section of like, what should we start doing? What should we stop doing? What should we continue doing? And under stop,
Start,
somebody
stop,
wrote
continue. Yep.
choosing the loud ones consistently.
right.
how do you choose the quiet ones? Like, what do you do to get the quiet people heard and to make transparency a two-way street for the quiet ones?
You have to reach out to them. They're not reaching out to you, and they're probably better in a one-to-one situation. They're not crowd people. Not everybody feels comfortable in front of 10, 20, 50, 200 people speaking up. There are definitely those that do. They're the long, many of them have been around a long time. So sort of that comfortableness of a seniority, if you will. But you've got to reach out to those that otherwise you don't hear their voices and just, check in. What are you up to? It's really that. I think that's just an easy thing you can do. Every manager can do that.
Yep. No, I agree. It's funny. One of the things that people said we should continue doing, and I quote, I truly appreciate the open door policy that Dennis and Bill have and their transparent insight into the future of the company. They work hard to keep everyone informed of things they are planning that will affect our jobs. Now, that has to give you some pride to hear
Mhm.
that.
Definitely. Yeah.
That's the whole goal.
That's the
You
goal,
know,
right?
that's
Yep.
that's it right there. Somebody got it. I mean, if only
Yeah.
one person, somebody got it. But I think, this represents a lot of people. Um, you know, when you set up this open door policy, I'd imagine that it wasn't solely for employees. It was like a general concept. How do you approach this when it comes to how we deal with clients?
Similarly, I mean, if we're not happy with them, we have to talk to them about it. So, we want to make sure that it's a win-win. One of the things I talk about in every sales call that we have is this a win-win for both of us? Because if it's a win for you, the prospective client, and not for us, it ain't gonna last. And if it's a great deal for us, but it's not so great for you, it ain't gonna last either. So again, just outright talking about it when things need to be talked about, being transparent. I mean, it's just another definition of transparency is having communications, communicating properly. But before you go on, I do need to slip something in that I want to make sure is on the record.
Okay, go ahead.
So, so all these surveys that we do, we tell everybody they're anonymous. And I'm saying here for the annals of time, they are 100% anonymous.
100%.
We have no idea who says what, and we never will. And I know there's a little bit of distrust because that's another corporate hangover people come to the table with is, they're told one thing, but they know nothing. And it is completely anonymous. I would love if somebody would come forward and feel the courage to tell me what they're thinking because there's no retribution here for speaking up. In fact, I reward people for it. I love to
Mhm.
hear, I'm the first one that's going to get up on a staff call and apologize for a mistake. And that's to show humility. That's to show that we all are going to fall, stumble at some point. So coming forward when you have a complaint is not something that should be viewed as a fear, but rather as an opportunity. And today we wait. Now, hopefully my Zoom chats will be, lighting up tomorrow with people who want to have a little fireside chat with Dennis
Yeah.
and Bill. But it would be nice to hear those things because that's that two-directional transparency. Sitting there and not saying what you're thinking is like keeping myself mum here and not telling you anything that's going on. So,
No, I think that's great. I think also, I got to be honest, I think that our transparency culture extends directly to clients. I mean, if you think about it, just in the past few months alone, we have started this podcast to share with our clients and other entrepreneurs everything about this company behind the scenes. Just here you go. I mean, you remember my favorite moment in this company, and I tell everybody who starts here the same story. Like a week after COVID hit, and we had a large percentage of our clients were some version of brick and mortar companies. I mean, not all, we've got plenty of online businesses that are
right.
clients, but we had a large percentage, at least back in 2020, of brick and mortar companies. And they, went like, oh my God, they didn't know if they had a business anymore. They didn't know what to do. And about 2 weeks into the massive shutdown, so end of March, we all got together as the leaders of this company and pulled all of our best knowledge from our respective departments, whether that was HR, providing services, running marketing and sales, handling accounting. I mean, we obviously handled our clients' accounting, but just all the things. And we said, listen, we're going to host a town hall Every client is welcome. Just show up and we're going to walk you through everything we do and how we do it virtually because they all just sent their employees home and went, we'll figure it out. And we're like, listen, come to this. You can ask us any questions. It's literally an ask me anything. But first, we're going to go through every section of our business and we're going to show you how we do annual reviews, how we know employees are working, how we communicate with each other, how we communicate when someone's sick and out of office because hello, people are getting COVID, over and over and over again. And I think we had 75 clients show up. And
Mm.
I remember that was probably the most like engaging town hall forum, and people were just raising hands. What do you do? How do you know? I mean, a lot of people had questions around like, how do you know if people are working or security? How are you keeping information safe? Because they had been in, internal servers that people were reporting to in offices, and now suddenly they're
Mm.
all at home on their computers or they've got stacks of information next to them and it's on their dining room table, so they were freaking out. And so we're sharing everything from how we manage our file rooms to access to everything under the sun. And it wasn't because it had anything to do with what we do for our clients. It was one because it was the right thing to do and we had knowledge and we wanted to share it just like we do on this podcast. But two, we were really just 100% like transparent. Just this is how we do everything. This is how we do everything we do. You can borrow, steal, whatever you need of any of it if it's going to help you be successful. And I think it was funny because even though we'd already been pretty transparent with clients, if somebody was out sick, hey, this person's covering for you today. This is who's on it. I feel like now we're even more open with our clients. I mean, we just rolled out summer Fridays for
Mm.
forever. And
Yep.
what's the first thing we did? We turned around and we told our clients, hey,
Yep.
from now on, we've given staff the opportunity if they'd like to be done at noon on Fridays. They're still working full week. So here's all, but we always share what we're doing with our
Right.
clients. Some of them are like, thanks, can you tell me how to do this? You know, but
Sure.
it's almost as if it wouldn't occur to us to do it differently than to just be as transparent with our clients.
Why would you want to do it any other way? I don't even know the other way.
Right. No,
You're
I
be
know.
zip it up and not say a word to anybody. I mean, I couldn't think about operating like that. It's just, it's not natural because then when you get questioned, it makes you feel so awkward. Oh, well, I meant to tell you, or I didn't want to tell you because I thought you'd get mad. Just lay it all out there. And you know what? We had zero negative feedback on that.
Zero. In fact,
Zero.
we did have a few clients that wrote back going, "That's awesome. You should
Yeah.
do that. That's great."
Right.
I mean, when we and I we listen, we full disclosure for anybody, it's not like this is easy. Sometimes we sit there debating for an hour or two, like, what should we say? How should we say it? How should we say it so people don't feel like they're not being serviced right or something? We have
Right.
concerns. We're
Yeah,
normal.
of course. Yeah.
Um, but it was funny because once we got that message out there and we just explained, like, look, nothing's changing in our services. Everybody's working the same number of hours. We're just giving them the option to be done on Fridays at noon if they would like for all year long. And I mean, what was amazing is there were people going, I think I'm going to do this. Like, thanks for letting me know. That's cool. I think that's a great step in worker productivity and company, satisfaction. And it's so cool sometimes because I always say, like, we're not just president, we're also the member kind of thing. We live
Yeah.
right
Right.
inside this entrepreneurial ecosystem that we support. All of our
Yeah.
clients are just like us. We're all building businesses, we're all growing, we're all trying to do the right thing by our employees, by our clients, by all of these things. And I think it's kind of fun because we're in this really cool community where when we share this with our clients, most of the time they just high five us back and go, yeah, you are.
Yeah. I recently read an article that half day on Fridays is one of the in the top five requests by employees. One of the top in the top five. I don't know which one it was off the top of my head, but it was in the
Top five
top
in the top.
five.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so it is a very popular thing, and it's a shift in our society. Again, it's a generational shift, and I think it's a nice thing, and I'm enjoying it. So,
To be fair, I think it's so logical anyway, and I think sometimes people get structure in the way of logic a lot. There's this idea that there's this sort of standard Monday through Friday, 40 hours, 8 hours a day is so antiquated because if you think about the way people often work, the way I work, the way you work, I'm here till way past 5 many weekdays. So
mhm,
by the time half day on Friday rolls around, first of all, I've hit quite a few hours. And secondly, like I'm mentally spent. You're not getting that much more out of me. And
yeah,
and I'm starting to hear from people who want to get started on something by just acknowledging the shift in the way people work and the fact that you might be getting 10 hours of somebody on a Tuesday.
yeah,
Like, what are you benefiting by keeping them in a seat until five
right.
hours till 5 o'clock on
5
Friday?
o'clock. Yeah,
Nothing.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, now all of this is, in my mind, a byproduct, I wouldn't even call it the primary objective, but the byproduct of all this is loyalty. Another thing that's lost in American business today is loyalty. We're creating loyalty for our employees because we treat them correctly. And I think that's part of this whole transparency conversation. Just be upfront about that. That's the end result as far as I see. I have one other interesting thing I wanted to mention real quick. Um, I wrote this in my show notes. Rumors. I hate rumors.
Rumors. Oof.
I hate because rumors
Dennis,
are
have
at
you
the
heard we're going to sell the company?
yes, that's the one. You know what? It was down to two in my head. It was either I
That's the
was gonna
only one I can think of.
okay, it was either I was gonna retire or we were gonna sell the company. I personally think it was I was gonna retire.
I'm
Um,
gonna just tell people you're retiring just to see what happens. I'm just kidding.
yeah, we'll plant that seed, see what happens.
Yes,
See,
we'll
it's
see
like
what
a game
happens.
of telephone with two
Yeah.
string and two cans, you right? By the time it gets to the end, it's God only knows what
Yeah.
they say. But when I heard about that, I actually said something on the team call. I actually said, I don't like rumors. If you have something that you are not certain about, ask. Don't start a rumor. And then, you believe it or not, the person who started it came to me.
Wow. I would say
I,
that is the byproduct of a culture of transparency. Because
yeah,
most people would not feel comfortable
yeah,
saying, I'm the one who started it.
yep,
Dennis, I think it might be
exactly.
all the golf, though.
I won't, what, that I'm retiring because of all the
Yeah.
golf? Yeah. I don't know
I'm just
about that.
kidding. Well, listen, I mean, Bill's favorite thing is tell everybody we've never taken any money, so why on earth would we sell the company all of a sudden?
Yeah,
Um,
right.
there's so many, there are a lot of rumors though, and I think rumors are just the nature of the beast in any company, People get fearful, people create things, people are concerned you're going to go pro with golf. I mean, I'm excited for that.
But if
But
it ever is going to happen, we'll be sure to tell everybody. We'll be
yes, it'll be
transparent
on the
about it.
staff call
It, it,
first.
it will be discussed rather than them hearing about it in the newspaper or something. Because I have no place for for rumors. Again, they're just the root of evil when people start semi making stuff up or think they heard something and they tell the next person more like factual than just their
Yes,
thoughts.
yes. And then they
That's
start
how
saying
it,
it with authority, and you're
yeah,
like,
say it with authority. Right.
yeah. Well,
Exactly.
it's the same
Yeah.
thing as when people get all freaked out that they're like gonna go into some sort of negative meeting or get fired or something, and you're like, whoa, we have said 1,000 times that you're never gonna be surprised in an annual review. Like
Yeah.
you will completely have known the entire time because we give you feedback in the moment and we're really transparent about how you're doing in your position. Like and I laugh, I still laugh because of my team who thinks it's hilarious, but they still come nervous. And it's such a natural reaction. But I'm like, guys, I have told you a million times I'm never going to say anything that you don't know, like to be true. And they're like, I know, but you just never know. I'm like, oh God. Like somebody
Well,
tell me the year you get to. I know what year it took me. It was about year 5 when I came to my annual review and I was not nervous anymore. And I was just kind of like, do you want me to run it? Do you want me to tell you how it went?
yeah. Well, I would say that's just because they've had bad experiences
Yes.
where
People have
they are
patience.
caught blindsided. But
Right.
there's one other thing I wanted to squeeze in there if I
Yes.
can
We can.
for the annals here. Um, and the transparency I want to just talk about for a few minutes was what happened in 2008 and then what happened in 2019. And
Okay.
I am like, I don't brag. I'm very humble. You know that by now. But this to
You could be
me,
proud of something. So
I am very proud. I am
tell us
very
what you're
proud.
proud of.
I am very proud. I think this is for me that turning point where that level of transparency just went to a whole nother level. So back in 2008, Great Recession, everybody knows that. We were a small company. I went and looked it up. We had about 20 employees. And Bill and I knew everybody. We were on the phone with everybody. I mean, there was probably one other controller in the company. I was probably still acting like a controller back then. And so we had a lot of interaction with those 20 people and we sort of walked them through what was happening. And we did lose clients, went out of business. We did still continue to bring businesses in, and we didn't end up laying off one person. And was it was comforting to know that we didn't have to make that decision. But COVID was a whole nother ball of wax, a whole nother dimension. And when it first started, evolving and developing and snowballing into this growing unknown thing, we did two things. The first thing we did was we called the staff together and we told them we were going to have regular meetings to update you. As we got information, we would share it with you. And the second thing we said was, please reach out to all your clients and ask them how they're doing. What help do they need? And so we began getting feedback. And then Bill and I started calling the clients one at a time and making financial arrangements with them.
I'm proud of that. I tell people all about that. The owners of the company got on the phone with every single client to discuss their situation and to make sure it worked for them going
Yep.
forward.
Right. If they needed it was, you know what it reminded me of? I love this movie. It's a Wonderful Life. And the
My
little
favorite.
old lady shows up at the bank just before they're ready to go out of business. And she's got $24 in the savings account. And she says, I need my $24. And George Bailey says to her, but what do you need right now?
Right.
And she says something like, could I have
Was it
$6 and
$2 or
20
something?
cents?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it was something
Something
with
really
change.
specific. Yes.
Yeah, right. It was something very
Yeah.
specific. And so, of course, he gave her that.
A
And,
big
the
kiss
rest
too.
of yeah, big kiss did. And the movie went on. And so we basically went to clients. We said, what can we do for you? What can we help? How can we help? And we said, we can defer fees. We can reduce fees. We whatever. And some said, we're good. And so they were transparent with us. They were
Mhm.
honest with us. And we moved forward with them. Others said, could you just defer some of our fees? We're going to pay you. We need you to do everything you're doing. Just push it out later. And then some said, well, our business is actually down. We don't need as much. Could you reduce your fee? So we did a little bit of all these different things. And we got through in the end with only two clients who went out of business. And they were in very specific
Yep.
industries. One of them was travel. I don't recall what the other one was. But travel industry was
Well, we
decimated for
didn't
3 years.
lose a client
We
over.
did not lose a client over
I
that.
mean, that's
Right.
I would love to meet another business that can say the same thing.
Yeah.
I really
And then
would.
but then the other side of it, which is really the part that I'm proud of. I mean, I was very proud of all that. Don't get me wrong. But what I was equally proud of was when we started doing these weekly meetings. So immediately we reforecasted, we saw where we were going to be. We looked at the reality of client hours going down, not needing as much, staff. So we were able to kind of pull back on our recruiting. Um, but again, in the end of the day, we kept every person. We got a PPP loan that got us through it. But really, what was the proud moment for me was I came up with a 5-part financial plan. I called it the DEFCON 1 to 5. And 5 was like basic stuff. We're going to cut out birthday gifts and client gifts and stuff like that. And
Mhm.
we got down to DEFCON 1 and I laid it all out for good or bad. We'd have to lay people off. And we only got down to DEFCON 3, whatever those steps in the middle. I don't
Right.
remember exactly at this point. But But the point was every week, not every 2 weeks like we have the team call now, every week we got on the phone and we talked about what was happening. We talked about clients who were cutting back and clients who suspended service or whatever the case
Mhm.
might be. We talked about what measures we were at. And I'm telling you, that would be the kind of place I'd want to work in, that I knew what was going
I
on in
mean,
this tremendous period of uncertainty where, I mean, there's just stuff is coming at you left and right. You think the end of the world is coming.
I agree, and we heard that from our employees on a regular basis, especially those whose spouses and partners did not have that sense of job security or that
Yeah,
sense of transparency. They had no idea what was coming around the corner. They had no idea if their company was about to lay off 50,000 people or furlough or whatever some of those
right,
words that suddenly came out of nowhere were that weren't specifically laying off, but like meant you couldn't get paid.
right.
Or
Furlough.
reduced, yeah, reduced salaries. There are all kinds of words I learned in
Yeah.
2020. But
Yep.
we had a lot of employees who were coming to work terrified. Their
Yeah.
kids were home. They were, trying to manage teaching them. Their spouses were possibly facing not, being employed. And they came at least to work and never wondered what was happening. And I think that, and our clients could say the exact same thing. They
Yeah.
weren't wondering either. And I mean, even we went out of our way to keep them posted on everything we possibly could for what was coming out in terms of evolving things around PPP loans and other aid and reporting and what we could do to help them in terms of making sure they were, primed for that. We set up an entire section of our website on COVID-19 resources.
Mm.
So yeah, I would agree with you. I think that, but I also think that it's funny that you say that because COVID-19 also was one of those sort of milestones of when transparency hit a whole new level in our company. It
Yeah,
was
that's what I'm
we
saying. Yeah.
but we didn't just do it for COVID. We just opened the
No,
doors.
no, 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 no.
Yeah,
It was a turning point. There was
yes,
no, and it was not a planned turning point. It just happened, and it felt even better than it had before, and so we just continued doing it.
yeah,
Yeah, so it was one of those. I have to say one of those proud moments
yeah. I
in
agree.
time. Yeah,
I don't think this podcast would exist if we hadn't been through these iterations where we're just saying, "Hey, let's come on and tell everybody everything, for better or for worse."
right.
I think we had to get to this point even just to do this. But, um I really appreciate all your and I feel like we could talk about transparency for another hour or two. But it's been about an hour, I think. So I don't want to keep you too much longer. I will say this, I agree that loyalty is absolutely one of the biggest byproducts of transparency, whether it's employee or client. Um, Interestingly enough, next week we're going to jump right into the mindset that went into applying for best workplaces in 2024 and what that means for our company and what it means for our clients and what other businesses can do if they want to be an award-winning best workplace. So I think transparency certainly has a huge
High
role.
on the list. Yep, big
Yes.
high on the list, definitely.
Even if you don't tune into next week, I think if you just do everything we just talked about,
Yeah,
probably get there.
sure.
But Dennis, thank you so much. Is there anything else before we wrap up that you would like to share with entrepreneurs that are maybe like thinking about transparency, but just overwhelmed by the whole thing?
So when I go for, I'm a new golfer. I'm 64. I've only started 2 years ago, 62. And so when I go and I go for lessons every Wednesday, everybody knows that by now. And I joke with my pro because he'll coach me, of course. And one of the slogans that I came up with was um, "Think less, swing more." Right? And so all I would say to entrepreneurs is think less, do more. Stop thinking about it, just do it. There's no magic to it. There's
Yeah.
no special sauce. You don't need to have a degree in it. You don't need to be trained in it. Just think of a place where you would want what the place would look like if you were working there. What would make you feel like really connected to that company and to the people that run it and the heart and soul of those owners and the message that they're trying to convey and the people that they're trying to take care of. And I do look as 200 people as my sheep. I'm the shepherd. Bill and I are the shepherds, taking care of the sheep. And that's not to say anybody's sheepish, but just using the analogy of you could say cows, I guess, if you want. So, but
We're all good. We're all good. I love it though. I agree. And I think that that's important for people to, operate the way you'd want to have somebody run a company you are working on is
yeah,
really just as simple as that. And then I would also add that don't get too in your head over what could go wrong by sharing because to be fair, there are negative comments we get sometimes over things we share. And
of
again,
course.
and if you listen to all our podcasts you heard on a few episodes ago, not everybody's going to like everything you have to say. And that's okay. Maybe they're not the right fit for a client or an employee, and that's okay too. It's very possible that somebody could have disliked our summer hours announcement. Doesn't mean we're not going to do it. It just means maybe this isn't for you.
Right.
That's okay too. Being
Yeah.
transparent might actually help you focus your energy on the things that matter and the people that align with your priorities instead of trying to be everything for everybody.
It is practically impossible to please everyone all the time.
Unless you're
And unless you're what?
a taco. It's a joke.
Taco. Okay. Not into tacos. But what I would say is the majority. Do the majority feel as though their needs and concerns are being addressed? And I'd say the answer is yes. So yes, you'll always have a few. I could never imagine being a politician. I mean, you just cannot
I would
win.
never sleep.
Yeah, and yeah, I
Sad
don't know
all the
what,
time.
I'd be dead.
Yeah.
So,
All right, we're going in a weird angle.
all right.
Dennis, thank you for your time. Thank you, everybody, for listening. We'll see you next week as we dive into best workplaces and what we do at ADC to go after these awards. Thanks for joining us and have a great week.
All right. Thanks, Andrea.